So, welcome to my presentation, Exiled Lives on the Stage, which is part of my Marie Curie research project, which is supported by the European Commission. And in that project, I tried to find answers to the challenges of existing political subjectivities at risk due to totalitarian state practices in Turkey and their afterlife and performance under exilic circumstances. My focus is on the artists who left Turkey for new host cities like Berlin, Amsterdam, Cardiff, and London. This is why, for today's panel, I have invited Turkish actor, director, and he's so many other things, of course, Mehmet Ali Alibora, here before me, who resides in Cardiff at the moment, but also in London sometimes. Kurdish playwright, director Mirza Metin, who is sitting there on the left, but probably you will see him better on the stream later, who lives in Cologne and is looking to relocate to Berlin, and Kurdish poet, librettist, and translator Kawa Nemir, who is in Amsterdam right now. I hope thereby to create a dialogue around their experiences of risks and roots, the networks, and their current practices from a comparative point of view. And I would like to stress it's actually quite unusual to have both Turkish and Kurdish artists in one panel, which is probably today still unthinkable in Turkey. It's also important to say that before 2017 I lived in Turkey, where I lived through the Gezi uprising up until the post-coup witch hunt, which sadly caused my Turkish partner and me to lose our jobs and leave Turkey. My partner became also a self-exiled academic, as so many peace academics did, due to their support of the peace petition titled "We Will Not Be Party of This Crime," that drew public's attention to the acts of violence perpetrated by the state in the Kurdish region of Turkey. Thus, the research project ExiLives comes from a place of practical risk and a profound need to start collecting the voices and works by Kurdish and Turkish theater practitioners, as well as other artists, in response to urgent cultural, political, and aesthetic matters that connect Turkey and Germany today. This includes effective stories through ethnographic research, as well as artistic expressions that we can analyze through the performative lens and wider critical frameworks, such as sociological notions of exile, but also policy frameworks. And that's also why today I wanted to present to you a policy report in the making, and all of you got a sample of that. And it's also online since yesterday. But as I said, it's a draft. It's something I would like to discuss with you, or in the corridors, or via email if you have any comments. That would be very nice. No doubt, within the current state of politics, there's also an overlapping interest in theater and performance studies to look at forms of refugee theater. And the connection certainly begs for reflection on what Zygmunt Bauman had called the dialectic between the exile and the refugee as constitutive of liquid modernity. Quote, "Liquid modernity is made up of exiles and refugees which have very different functions. One is on the side of emancipation, the other on the side of suffering. One determines and resists, while the other is functionless and placeless. One thinks critically, while the other is pulped into the faceless mass and barely lives." That's why he also uses the term the bare life. So exile allows then for a discussion of a larger structural feeling that many people share today, not only by those who have left out of their own free will, but also those who stayed and do not feel represented by their governments. This sense of self-exile, in contrast to worse cases of political refugees, often brought up in the interviews that I conduct, including in my podcast, Exiled Lives, and there will be a new episode coming up with Mehmet Ali Alibora very soon. And it's available through all the different platforms, so you can easily find it. A returning question is then often, and we can start with that here today, what is exactly an exile? And does the artist feel exiled? And I'm sure that some of these, of the people today, of the guests, will say, no, I completely don't feel exiled. Now, in the long-standing German Exilforschung, exile can be traced back to the Old Latin exilium and exul, meaning banishment and banished person. But even in earlier civilizations, there have been practices of designating an offender as an outcast and depriving them of the comfort and protection of the peer group or community. Etymologically, the German exile means displacement that is enforced and an involuntary movement from one place to another, but there have been also confusions whether this has to be solely because of political reasons. In my research, I observe a disparity of reasons in recent years why Turks and Kurds have been relocating to Germany and other parts of the world, while still relating to a general sense of exile or self-exile, even when the displacement had no clear political or legal reason. Most relate to the decline of civic space. So I actually made let's say a distinction between the social, political, economic, and psychological reasons, but of course they often overlap. The decline of civic space since the Gezi protests and the July 15 coup attempt, of course, which led to an increased curbing of freedoms, like the freedom of association, assembly, and expression, as well as a steady decline of democracy and civil society. But also the seeming randomness of the decrees and the arbitrariness of the layoffs in that 2-year window between 2016 and 2018 played a hand. As a result of this climate of fear that normalized every dramatized political event into an issue of a nation-state organized purge, many made the plunge into the unknown. And I tried to sum up, of course, it's very small. You should never make slides like this. I'm sorry, it's very pedagogically incorrect. A timeline from 2013 up till 2022. What kind of are the key events? I'm not sure how much of Turkish history you know, but obviously the framework should, I start actually from the Kurdish peace process that lasted from 2012 to 2015. 2013 is this very important moment in end of May, June, when the Gezi Park uprising or protests erupt. We will be talking especially with Mehmet Ali Alabora about that. And as a kind of backlash, because a lot of the independent theaters were also part of that movement, a year later, lots of the independent theaters in Istanbul lost their funding. 2015 is one of those moments, of course, when the elections show that the AKP of Erdogan, the party of now President Erdogan, was losing more and more power. Basically, the pro-Kurdish party broke the majority. And then the peace petition in 2016, because of course, since the elections showed that the Kurds were not so fine anymore with the current regime, they started to stop the peace process and basically, put curfews and bombings in the Kurdish region again. So academics responded to that. And that's basically when so many people started to leave. Then you have 2016, the failed coup attempt. That gave people the power to abuse, basically, during the state of emergency to do this witch hunt. And then we have arrest after arrest after arrest, like Osman Kavala, who was then seen as sort of the big mastermind behind Gezi. Of course, that is not true. Many also actors and journalists. For the German case, Dennis Yücel, for instance, and Pieter Verstraete, for instance, are important there. Okay, so that is, in a nutshell, the whole history. Of course, there is more, but I just wanted to show you that. So I hope that gives you a bit of a background of the timeline. Of course, we should not romanticize this self-exiled experience. In cultural theory, the exile is often defined as a contentious subject position that is constituted between at least two languages in our places in terms of a perpetual becoming, a multiple belonging. The exilic experience is commonly defined as being home away from home, bearing a double consciousness, a double perspective on the home and receiving country or city while illuminating the exile's own subjectivity. Because of that double consciousness, writers such as Bauman, particularly after his 1968 Polish exile, have designated the exilic situation as a window to time, to modernity, to struggle. But in reality, as Edward Said wrote, exile is strangely compelling to think about, but terrible to experience. And as Emine Sevgi Özdemir, for instance, describes in her latest novels, A Space Bounded by Shadows, that double perspective might lose its sense of arrival equally in one's own identity experience. Oh, sorry, I'm going ahead there. Once you have left your own country, you'll never arrive in a new home again. In that case, only a few special people become your country. It seems that being exiled is perpetually being at loss in a permanent state of temporariness. But there might be hope in Said's question. If true exile is a condition of terminal loss, why has it been transformed so easily into a potent and even enriching motif of modern culture? Modern Western culture is in large part the work of exiles, émigrés, refugees. I see resonance of that idea in Jana Meerson's book, Performing Exile, Performing Self, namely in how the destabilization or the trauma caused by the exilic living situation demands to be worked through in creative ways. The exilic performative, so to speak, that produces a new kind of artist identity and body of work. Notwithstanding the underlying therapeutic aspirations that are ascribed by Meerson to the work of exiled artists, I am questioning how much of this is actually produced by our expectations as audiences and critics that are brought upon from the art community, from intendants, from artistic directors, from boards for financial support, or even governments, rather than from a profound reflection on the self or on the identity of the artist. And that's something that I definitely would like to discuss with the guests today. So besides studying the life stories and works, collecting them in this archive in the making, a counter-archive, if you will, I also look at the policy framework and institutional questions of the host country, particularly in Germany, which includes networks, solidarity networks, special artist residences. Karel Tizé, for instance, describes how Germany's long-standing attitude towards migrants as temporary and transient, starting with, of course, the Gastarbeiter in 55 to 73, and particularly confirmed after the fall of the Berlin Wall with the need to control the influx of foreigners to secure a certain German identity and social unity, led to a concept like Kettenduldung, or chain tolerance, which often refers to those whose toleration status is particularly insecure, long-lasting, or has no end in sight, but whose repeated approvals of short-term permission to stay adds another link to the toleration chain. Hence, temporary residence status and temporary access to employment can and should also be understood as a temporariness of the migrant that is actually appealing to governments and labor markets. The similarity with precarious work and temp labor in our current neoliberal world is not coincidental. Through a policy report and debates as the one today, and I actually also have organized a second debate, so if there's not enough time today, we will definitely have 2 more hours tonight at Engelnest from 6 o'clock onwards. It's free, you can just show up. And that's going on tonight with some music and with some book reading as well. The project aims then to uncover the intricacies of the current state of cultural politics, waging on the predicaments of exiles. Now, the current report, and I'll try to be brief, is still under development, but available through that link here, and of course you have it in your hands right now. It puts the displaced artists relocating to Germany in a larger context of global process of precarious artistic work and political censorship. It seeks to map the support networks, programs, and institutions, as well as consider questions of sustainability, levels of risk, and care or self-care. In the end, the policy brief defines a few recommendations for a more inclusive and sustainable approach to help artists from risky geographies in ways that stimulate both relational care and self-care beyond the necessary entrepreneurial definition that is predominantly looking at quality of artistic labor, meritocracy, and productivity. In Germany, after the coup in Turkey, there was a lot of political goodwill to support the incoming flow of artists, as well as academics, journalists, intellectuals from Turkey, notwithstanding their very different levels of personal risk, yet a common strategy was never reached. This was partly due to the very divided policy infrastructure, where social, political, and developmental issues regarding Turkey are dealt with by the Ministry of International Cooperation, as well as the Foreign Offices, which has its own Martin Roth initiative, shared with the Institute für Auslandsbeziehungen, IFA, which is actually also, I thought, I know, that brought Mirza Metin, for instance, to Germany, and the Goethe Institute, whereas labor and visa issues fall under domestic policy by the Ministry of Interior, more particularly the Federal Office for Migration and Refugees, and these policy areas work independent from each other. Moreover, art and cultural production, as you all may very well know, of course, as theater scholars in Germany, is regulated very differently in the different states in the Bundesländer, with very little interaction. On the higher level, like the Cultural Foundation of the German federal state, or even the higher, the European framework. Okay, so let me show this one here. This is what I'm talking about. Yeah. There is the Creative Europe and the S+T+Arts program under the Horizon 2020. There is no active support or strategy for individual artists at risk, which leaves the support often more in the hands of the cities, the non-profit organizations, and the residency programs of cultural institutions. Fellowship programs that are often used by several artists from Turkey are welt often as Berlin, by the Berlin Senat, Department for Culture and Europe. This 2021 Academy in Exile special program Fixing What's Broken, that's quite recent. The more German-wide Aid Aid for Artists in Exile, a branch from the French AIDA organization. And Artists at Risk, AR, which recently also partnered with the Goethe Institute. For authors, like for instance someone like Kawa Nemir, there is the private initiative since 2000 funded by the Allianz Insurance Group, the Allianz Kulturstiftung, which collaborates actively with the European framework, and the PEN International Writer in Exile program with offices in Istanbul and Darmstadt, supported by the Minister of State of Culture and Media. While most support programs and residences offer immediate financial relief for the early days of the relocation, and some even help to embed artists at risk also in cultural and social ecologies of the new homes, they are limited and not sustainable in the long run. Most newcomers do not speak German, and adapting to the new living situation, sometimes with a family in a new cultural and linguistic environment, requires much more time and energy than that the support programs can help with. After mapping the support mechanisms and programs, I produced a taxonomy of individual institutions who have supported artists at risk from Turkey in the past, but I will leave these further undiscussed, as you can read the report yourself, and we do need to urgently start the discussion. But I would like to disclose some of the results of the report. One are the deficiencies, the common deficiencies. Number one, there is, of course, the issue of the temporariness of support in an overstrained system that is entirely about project-based labor and thus output-oriented, not targeting at all the specific needs. I have also sensed a generational disparity and lag between artists with Turkish migration backgrounds because of all these different waves in the past. There's a dysfunctional fragmentation of means, as well as cut off from support for socially artistic work under anti-discrimination laws and special support for excluded groups. And there's also, in a way, a necessary widening happening of the scope of support and solidarity, which complicates the specificity of the needs of every newly arriving group of artists. Think, for instance, now of the Ukrainians, particularly when interest in groups who arrived earlier is waning. Now, by way of conclusion, the report categorizes 4 major points of recommendation towards longer-term sustainable solutions. 1, information and collaboration are key. A more strategic and targeted support could benefit from a coordinated effort by building relationships and communication channels with the specialized networks that enhance diversity and awareness regarding migrants, like the International Cities of Refuge network, but also more knowledge exchange involving the different actors, institutions, networks, support services, and residents of individual theaters and cultural centers is needed. Affirmative action in favor of inclusivity is needed, which includes diversity and representation of artists at risk. We should be very careful with the need for representation there, and treat artists at risk as equal partners rather than instrumentalize them as ambassadors of a culture. Artists may feel the need to have to address migration issues and or exploit their newly ascribed identity in order to get opportunities, thus compromising their artistic autonomy. So this should be really at the choice of the artist, I would say. And then the last one, oh no, that's not the last one. The third one is strengthen currently forming artist networks, like for instance Nexus is the one that Mirza put up here in Germany, to enhance communities in self-care rather than concern. And there's a kind of a difference between what is of concern and what is, something that we should care about or something that people should care about themselves. Although these two words are related, there's a big difference in that care has stronger ethical, material, and effective connotations. So according to someone like, for instance, de la Bella Casa, this notion extends a vision of care as an ethically and politically charged practice. And there's a shift, in focus here that I propose from an immediate concern to a more sustainable care or self-care in the scaffolding of support programs and strengthening of existing networks in favor of a more inclusive society. So that's the report. Definitely would like to hear your ideas about it, but we should now go to the discussion. If you have any comments, maybe in the last 15 minutes of the panel, you can address them, or send me an email, please. I mean, I'm definitely open for that. It's also on academie.edu, and you can also address your ideas there, and I look forward to that. Okay, let's go into the panel. Thank you. So, hi, this is a different perspective. Finally, we can see the guests. Yeah. So, again, this is Mehmet Ali Alabora. There is Kawa Nemir, who sits now in the middle, Mirza Metin, and the translator Ilknur Bilir. She will be translating the parts from Kurmanji in English, since specifically for Mirza, he wanted, it's a political issue for him to talk about his issues in his own language, in Kurmanji. Kawa speaks Kurmanji too, of course, but he is also a graduate, I think, of English in that only depends on the moment. So, but he decided to speak in English, and yeah, I mean, Mehmet Ali speaks wonderful English and maybe a little bit of Welsh as well. But yeah, so that's the language situation. Obviously, he's a Turkish speaker. Yeah, so I think for the first 5 to 10 minutes, maybe all three of you could say something more about yeah, how you first of all experience yourself maybe as an exiled or not exiled, self-exiled, or how would you term yourself, and what brought you actually to leave Turkey in the end? What were the real reasons for your decision to leave?
Shall I start? Yeah. Hi, my name is Mehmet Ali Alabora. I'm an actor, theatre director, and nowadays creative director of a campaign agency, and also a co-founder of a startup. This exile thing and then the pandemic changed my life completely. The reason why I left Turkey, for the ones who don't know, for the ones who already know, sorry, it's going to be a repetition, but so in 2013, there were massive protests in the middle of Istanbul called Gezi Park protests. I was one of the first people to go there, and one of the first persons to start tweeting about the events. And on the third day of the protests, it became a nationwide thing. And on the 30th, the night of the 30th of June, which was just the day before it became a nationwide thing, I sent a tweet out saying, the tweet was just this. Probably this tweet is the most notorious tweet in Turkish history, probably in Turkish history. Everyone knows this tweet. So it was, the matter was not just Gezi Park. Haven't you still realized, my friend? Hashtag resist Gezi Park. That's it. And at the time, it was retweeted 30,000 times and shared 30,000 times, which is not a massive number these days, but it was back then. And on the 1st of June, government's response to the protests was to create this premise that they would pursue for the following 9 years up until today, which was that this was not an environmental protest, but an attempted civil coup. By the way, civil coup is an oxymoron, to remind you that. I mean, a civil coup to overthrow the government, and that was their premise. And their proof, on the 1st of June, the Deputy Prime Minister made a press conference giving my tweet as a proof, because the tweet said the matter is not just Gezi Park. So they said the matter wasn't Gezi Park, it was to overthrow the government. So then they've created this premise over the last 10, 15 days, which is still going on, and my friends are in jail at the moment, 7 of them, who were all targeted by using this premise. The premise was basically that this was an attempted coup, a civil coup, which was supported by secret powers, and those secret powers could be Germany, Britain, Israel, CIA, America, I don't know, you name it. A vague, big enemy of states who are trying to stop the emergence of New Turkey. And this big secret hand was using actors, artists, journalists, business people as pawns. And we were member of that big, whatever organization it is, that. And this was a network of people who also created the Ukraine, the previous Ukraine's Velvet Revolution, or the revolution in Serbia, and they were all connected, and somehow Soros was connected with all these. So this was the main premise. And on the first day, I was targeted by by Deputy Prime Minister, and on the 10th day, there was a newspaper. There is still a newspaper called Yeni Şafak, which is a pro-government newspaper. It came with a headline. The big headline was, "What a coincidence." So they were presenting the play I produced, starred, and directed 6 months, a year before the protests, and it just ended. It had ended just a month before the protests, and they said, "What a coincidence." And they claimed that the play was a rehearsal for the protests, because it was a unique play where the audience could stand alongside the actors. There was a fictitious dictatorship called Pinama, and there was the leader of Pinama, which was played by me, and there was a pianist who was my ex-wife, who was played by my ex-wife Pinar, and she was revolting against this dictator, and people, the audience members, were encouraged to tweet or to live stream and all those kind of things. This is now, what I told you, this absurd story that a play can be the rehearsal for an uprising, is in the 657-page indictment, which 7 people are in jail at the moment because of that indictment, because 6 of them had 20 years, 18 years in prison, and 1 of them had the highest penalty in the Turkish law, which is life imprisonment without parole. So that's why I left. So basically, when it comes to the matter of being exile and feeling like exile, it is, when first said and asked to me whether I was exile or not, or somebody demanded me to write something, and I was like, am I an exile? Obviously, I am an exile. I chose to be an exile first. In the first 4 or 5 years, there wasn't an imminent, immediate threat. I feared for my life. That's why I flee the country. But in the last 4 years, there's an immediate and imminent threat. But before the Gezi trial was on, I was thinking to myself whether I was an exile. And then I read, and I shared that with you, Henri Pachter's wonderful essay. He was a Jew from Germany who had to go on exile during the Nazi period, and I think he was a philosopher or a sociologist, with all the same people like Hannah Arendt and all the others, and they migrated. And there's a wonderful essay of him talking about on being an exile, and he says there that being an exile is not a matter of passport, but it's more of a mindset. So I thought to myself whether I'm an exile or not, and my question was, I am not, because I'm not looking forward to the day I'm going to go back. But of course, it's multi-layered. There are moments where you really feel like an exile, but generally, I am more of a person who likes to look forward. I look forward. I don't look back. That was, as Mr. Terim once said, I don't look back. I look front. That's what he said. So I'm such a guy that likes to look forward. That's why I tried to create myself a new life in Wales, and that's why I also consider part of myself as Welsh now, within the Welsh struggle, within the Welsh culture, everything to do with it. And so, for example, on the 1st of October, after I leave Berlin, I will be marching for independence of Wales, and I am one of the organizers. So that is how I feel. Maybe it's a coping mechanism, I don't know, but that is how I feel. Or maybe I'm looking for a new exile. Who knows?
Perpetually exiled. Okay, so thanks, that's wonderful, that's great. So we will definitely continue talking about what happened next, in Wales after we introduce the other artists. There's Kawan Emir, who, as I understand your whole history, you have been in a way, fighting for the Kurdish literature and the Kurdish language, which from very early on in your life you experienced the difficulties of. You were even expelled at some point from university. You had also a literary magazine and a publishing house that had to close down in the end of these reasons. And when you lived in Mardin, I think you kind of decided, well, because there was a police raid upstairs, you needed to leave, right? So can you explain a little bit more? How do you relate to this idea of exile, if at all? And yeah, how does it also transpire then now in your work in Amsterdam?
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. How can we do the translation? Shall I just talk in parts? Yeah. Okay, that's good. Well, as Mehmet Ali just underlined that it's multi-layered. My story is also such a story, but mine is naturally a bit more literary story, and I was in pursuit of finding a better situation in order to complete my works. But Pieter has just given some notes from my life that being Kurd or Kurdishness makes everything more difficult, and I've always been in the political and literary scene and on the stage since I was 13 or 14, and I worked for many Kurdish cultural centers, and I was taken under custody more than 50 times from 1990s on, and lastly they expelled me from the university, and later on they invited me, but I rejected. I just wrote to them, I reject your colonialist universities. And so all these things are making the case more difficult. Would you like to translate? Ignore? Okay, yeah, no, we don't need Kurdish translation. Okay, yeah. But actually I forgot. I had to start with the last paragraph, amazing paragraph of the first novel by James Joyce, A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. Its translation is to be published next year. I translated this in tandem with the translation of Ulysses, which took me 10 years. So the last amazing part of this autobiographical novel reads like this: Amen, so be it, welcome, O life. I go to encounter for the millionth time the reality of experience and to forge the smithy of my soul, the uncreated conscience of my race. And in Kurdish it is like this: Amin, bilawale bit, dobkhir hati, lele jiane. از لی دیدم چم دا بوجارم ملیونم را روی راستیار سلبوری ببم و حسن خانه اگیانه خدا وجدانا نافرند یا قوم خوا بدم بر چاکوچان. Actually, the oppression and the story about that is really too long, and it will take days to tell this story. But main reason for me was to preserve my works and especially in order to be able to complete my translations. That's why in 2018, under those hard circumstances, right after the Kobani uprising, and there were risks about me and all my friends, I suddenly took decision of fleeing and going on in exile, and Amsterdam was my city. I had chosen it years and years ago. And I found a nice refuge in Amsterdam. I was supported by the Anne Frank House and also Anne Frank Museum, and I could complete all my translations, especially the translation of Ulysses and many other works by William Shakespeare, and many theatrical pieces and other novels. And I started to enjoy, can I say that it's a kind of freedom? No, because I still my mind is still busy with all my life that I left behind in Kurdistan, which is under severe oppression. So I think my soul is still there. Physically, I'm here in one of the nicest European countries. And I'm always open to that. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I may be somewhere else. But my case is mainly to be able to get the proper situations and circumstances in order to complete my works, which have always been in the service of my oppressed language. And these extreme and immense translations are always surprising people, but actually from 1990s on, according to a plan, I started my translation, also my poetry, and I saw many, many oppressions. So though officially we are sharing Turkey and we are living in the same country, but actually, let's say Turkey or the west part of Turkey is really not knowing anything about what's happening in Kurdistan. A nation is being oppressed. And my pen and my toil and my work is all for that. That's it for now.
Thank you. Yeah. That's wonderful. Yeah, that's, I mean, terrible in a way, of course, but thanks for sharing that. And then Mirza Metin, of course, also with the same Kurdish background, of course, but you've become, I think, one of the most exciting theater playwrights and directors in the Kurdish theater, or theater in Kurmanje, if you call it this way, for Turkey. You kind of left Turkey, but in not similar circumstances, I believe. Maybe you can say something about that. And I think in your case, we would definitely like to hear also how it is going, because you have been in Germany now for the last 4 years almost, yeah. So yeah, and again, if you see yourself as an exiled person, or if that's totally relevant for you.
Gelek spas.
Thank you so much for being here.
Dve peşi ve kebejim ku az ne ji Türkiye me, az ji Kurdistanê me, ev yek gelek tişta ve çareser bike de şême de.
First of all, I would like to explain that, or to say this, or make it clear that I'm not from Turkey, I'm from Kurdistan.
Heger devleta te tune be, de warê xwe de jî, li hemû cîhanê jî sirgûnî.
In that respect, maybe it's better to say that if you don't have any state, as your homeland, you're always in exile.
Bajarê yekem ya sirgûniya min İstanbul e.
That's why maybe I have to say that the first city that I was in exile was in Istanbul.
Ez 3 salî bûme em ji Kurdistanê derketine, mecbûr mane hatine İstanbulê.
I was 3 years old when we immigrated to Istanbul from Kars.
û ez li İstanbulê mezin bûm lêbelê, piştî ku ez hatim Almanya, ez pê hesiyam ku me ferq kir ku İstanbul diaspora ya mina yekemîn e.
After I moved to Germany, I felt that I was actually in exile in Istanbul. Like, I grown up in Istanbul. Maybe we can say that it was my city that in which I grown up. But yeah, after my experience in Germany, I can say that I was twice in exile in Germany.
Kurdistana Bakur, koloniya Türkane, eger em ji vê çerçeva binêrin, em dikarin fam bikin ku Kurd li İstanbulê çi dijîn.
That's why we need to say that, I guess, at first, Istanbul is colonized. Northern Turkey, or no, Eastern Turkey is colonized now, In that perspective, in this frame, maybe, we should just look at this look at this issue now.
û Kurd zimanê xwe, xwebûna xwe, çanda xwe li İstanbulê wenda dikin.
Kurds who are living in Istanbul are losing their identity, the essence of their, what matters for them in their culture, in their history.
3-4 مليون كرد لإسطنبول دجين هروها بعوقاسيجي متروبولي مزنية تركيا دجين ولوان متروبولا هيدي كرد دبن ترك.
In Istanbul, we can say that approximately 3 million Kurds living, and also in the other capital cities in Turkey too. And when we look at this from like these huge numbers, we cannot say that like they are really Kurds, you know, they are just beginning to lose what they make them Kurds. And they are losing their languages, the matters that are important for them, for Kurds.
أري قاباج في چارچوبه بنرم قاباز هاتم ألمانيا يجي لألمانيا من بيشي خوابك سرگني هيس ندكر.
And that's why I didn't feel myself like I was in exile in Germany, because I was there in exile at first hand.
بيرة تشتي نوا سالا أول أزوج توريستك بمارست لألمانيا.
In the first years, to be honest, I was like a tourist here.
3 سالين داوين هيدي تشتينكو از جيام تشتينكو از الهمبري وان مام يعني أو تفجرين سبين ألمان يعني جي تفجرين سبين أوروبي فامك وصا دامكو تشتينكو از الاسطنبولي دجيام هماني تشتبون يعني ويش أغي از بحسيامكو اسطنبول جي سرگني بو اف درجي جارا دويام جي سرگني.
Why I'm telling this? Because, yeah, as I said, that the first year was like I was a tourist here, you know, just wandering around, discovering what's the new to me. But after 3 years, it just came to me that what I'm now feeling among these quote white mind and white gaze here in Germany, I just start to feel exactly the same feeling, exactly the same thing, the patterns that I can catch while we moved to Istanbul first time. That's why it just bring me to say that I felt that I was in exile in Germany.
او سرگندون نتشتگی و های کت واره خواه بگوهرین هری اردنگاریه که جدا جغرافیه که جدا ده همان دمه ده مرف جلاشه خواه و جهشه خواه جی سرگند به.
When we talk about being exiled, it's not always about like geographically changing your locations or immigrate to somewhere else. You know, it's also about the mindset, what you think, the perspective to the whole world. It's began to changing. I guess the exile is like maybe structured like this.
از به ترکی مزم بوم پشتی 20 سالی خو از هینی کردی بوم و از زمان خو هات بوم سرگن کردن.
As I said, that I grown up in Istanbul, and I moved there when I was 3 years old, and I grown up like in 30 years. When I started to learn Kurdish, I was 30 years old. You know, I was in exile in Kurdish, in Turkey, in 20. Oh, okay, yeah, 20 years. Yeah, I was in exile in Istanbul in 20 years. Yeah.
وی هاوی مرف دکاره بیجه کرد ج زمانین خواهتین سرگن کرن، ج لاشین خواهتین سرگن کرن و ج چاندین خواهتین سرگن کرن.
Maybe that's why we at first need to say that Kurds are exiled on their language, on their identity, basically because of they are Kurds, you know, yeah, and their culture. They are all exiled just because of these reasons.
و هست جخا باوریات أودك يعني دحلينا.
And of course, this process took something from you, your body, your identity, and the self-confidence in yourself. It just loses. It starts to melt down, you know. You're feeling that you are just losing it. You are losing it during the process.
جلوما جدویتو ج هنرمندین ترکا ج هنرمندین آلمانا بهتر بخوابتی بهتر بفکری بهتر بخویدی کو بگیجی استاوان نوان اینو که دادیش.
And of course, you see yourself like you have to work more than your colleagues here to just quote reach to their levels unquote.
أري يعني أو تجربة منا يا ألمانيا يجي ناف وان كوكيان دا درباز دبه وهما بيجا از أف جرما خويا ترك بني شخواد خم دا بيجم و أو كردي كو دهندري من دا دنگ كرد بون ناس نامنه تاني أو يعني دنگي من از إيدي دنگي خوا درد خم دنگي خوي رسن أوريجينال.
Yeah, basically, my whole experience here are just going through with this conflicts that I said right now. And meanwhile, I'm just trying to, you know, take what makes really me feel at some points like Turk, you know. I'm just trying to take this part from my identity, from my body, from my voice, and just wear or just to feel what makes me Turk. Like I'm a Kurd, you know, and that's why now I'm trying to voice my body, understand myself, and feel what makes Mirza as a Kurd.
ودولتا تركا حافظة كمجوية كبروتاز بمفكر بون وأز حول دم كو بي مجوية بروتاز باويجم خوابشوم جيبشوم.
I have to call this mind like in which I feel myself like Turk. I call it like ampute mind. It's not mind, you know. It's just given to us. And that's why I'm now trying to veer this off and just trying to reach what's hidden, what is exiled, what is censored. And I'm just trying to reach it.
هاتنا منا فيدري أس بتشكي قلاوي جبكم أز نب مجبوري هاتم أز هي دكارم هرم ورم تركيا كردستاني أز ب أوكي كي بورصة كيف هاتم سكولارشيب كيف هاتم و بيرجي مام جبو دو سالا أز بشانوي كألمان على خابتيم بيرجي الفرمان.
Just the answer to the factual question of the Pieter, why I just came here. I'm not in exile. I just got a scholarship, the art residency here, and like 4 years ago. And now to be honest, I just want to go back to Kurdistan and produce with my colleagues, Kurdish colleagues there. Now I'm not in exile.
داویه دا پشتی 4-5 ساله از خوازم جبر هرم کردستانه خو.
من گفت.
يعني ها جي از دکارم هرم ورم مقاله وکر يعني پروبلم متنه جبو ویگا.
Yeah, why I said that because be in exile is also matter like you can't go your country, you know. Now I have to like I would like to say this. I'm now going to Turkey. I want to go back to Turkey within 5 years maybe. I also do like some collaboration with my colleagues there too. That's why now I'm going and coming back to Germany and Turkey, but also in maybe next 5 years I want to definitely go back. Yeah, I have of course concerns going back to Turkey, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, this is. I hope you can understand a little bit. Of course, I'm not sure what the levels of knowledge here is about Turkey and the political situation. So definitely, you know, please stop us if you don't understand something or if you want more clarification. But I think in the next 15 minutes, I can ask a few more questions to connect the three speakers. Of course, they have all different experiences in Netherlands, in Germany, and in UK, Wales. So that's something I would like to tease out a little bit more. Now I would like to redirect a little bit the attention away from the question of self-exile to talk about more care and self-care, since that's also a topic that is now, because of the pandemic situation, has come up much more, and that also affects many more artists than just also the people who are at risk. But so the question I'm asking here is, from your experiences, did you experience support and help from existing networks, or have you also maybe set them up yourselves? And we have very different views here, of course, since Wales is a very different context from, for instance, Germany, that has already a longer infrastructure, also with waves of migration before, and Amsterdam with the context of Anne Frank, maybe where you were located. So I would like to hear what your experiences are, and maybe also how you stand towards this idea of self-care or care. Who wants to go first? Okay, Kawa.
Yeah, as initially I told that it's a long story, and it. Yeah, it's good now. Yeah, my story is not only is related to Turkey, which has occupied, or Iran, or Iraq, or Syria, which have been occupying 4 parts of Kurdistan for centuries. But I also have internal problems with my own people. That's why I was in pursuit of, or in search of, the personal story of James Joyce. And years ago, I was on the tracks of the cities and places and the stations he visited, and different countries. And this story and his great and giant works have always affected me, and maybe recreated my life. And I was feeling that I could complete, this huge story, maybe in one of the beautiful cities in Europe, and I chose to go on exile. Actually, in reality, I could have stayed in Kurdistan, and in reality, I'm never afraid of being imprisoned or being killed, because every day many people from my nation are being killed. But I had problem with Turkey, with Iran, and with Iraq and Syria, and also I have internal problems with my nation, which is leaving us alone, leaving all Kurdish intellectuals alone. And even for example, the Kurdish political movement is not accepting our intellectual stance. I'm very open-minded about this story and always underline everywhere. And during the pandemic, of course, many times I was happy not to see many people. And the city I've been living has always been very generous to me. After the grant I got from the Anne Frank House and the Anne Frank Museum, which was more than 1 year, our gemeente, our municipality, was very generous to us. And I think it was a kind of generosity which was special to artists and writers. And that's why I think Amsterdam has a difference from all other cities. And I turned the pandemic as a kind of opportunity for myself. And after this support, I could finish many other works, and I kept working for 2 years at home. And I could have time to talk about my exile. And finally, I was always coming to that conclusion that it was a really good decision for me, best decision of my life, to be able to choose, to decide on my life and go on exile, Amsterdam. And like old friends, like Mehmet Ali and like Mirza, I can also officially can go back to Kurdistan or Turkey, but I've never gone. And I don't think that I will go back to Turkey. If I have chance, I will go to Kurdistan, go back to Kurdistan. And if I have chance of making, or organizing kind of, walk for the freedom of Kurdistan or independence of Kurdistan, then like Wales, I think Mehmet Ali is going to support us because we need the support of Turkish friends. Yes, for now, that's all. There are many things. I'm not a good orator, but I think we are going to complete our stories. Yeah.
When it comes to self-care, what I can tell to new exiles, my advice to new exiles, if you want to put yourself in a position one day, first, don't be afraid. You know, I've been telling you this, I've been telling my friends this, maybe I told you this as well. So what do they say in the planes? The mask to yourself first, then to your child, right? So you need to put the mask on yourself first. So if I would give an advice to a person, first I would say, stop. Stop, take care of yourself. Forget about where you come from, forget about the traumas, take care of yourself. Because before you take care of yourself, and before you stood on your 2 feet, you cannot help anybody. Think of it like someone who escaped from, my girlfriend said this analogy, so I like it, so I have to reference her. Think about someone who escaped from Ukraine today, from the war, and they came to your house. And they are obviously in panic and shock. Exile is a shock, first of all, whatever it is. If that person says, I need to help my people, I need to help Ukrainians, I need to do something, what would you say to them? Relax. You've been out of something. You first need to just calm down and take care of yourself, compose yourself, and only then you can help others. So I think this is also the case for exiles. Some exiles come to other countries, they go like, I mean, at least from stuff that I've read, and from the stuff that I've experienced, observed, not experienced, but observed, most exiles go into a deep state, like a deep depression state after like a year or so, most of the time. Because when they first arrive, they're like, they want to they want to continue doing what they did. Help Kurdistan, help Ukrainian people, fight for Turkey, help. No. If you're in exile, if you had to leave and flee your country, a trauma has happened. So you need to calm down first. So I think self-care is utmost important for people who've been through traumas and those kind of incredible changes in their lives. Then obviously there is a time, it could take a year, it could take 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. Then you feel good, you feel better, you feel stronger. And obviously you will go back to that fight, but you don't have to as well. Because at the end of the day, you're a victim. And when you think about it, for example, in the feminist, from a feminist perspective, you never blame the victims. And whatever they do, if they cannot come out, if they cannot talk, if they cannot do anything, you don't blame the victims. You just help the victims because they're victims. And someone in exile is a victim of something, of anything. It doesn't have to be a massive political thing all the time, but it is what it is. So I think in that sense, self-care is very, very important. And we need help for this. We need others to tell us stuff about this. And that was kind of my experience. Now, it's been a couple of years that I now feel stronger and I feel confident because I can look after myself. I don't have to at least ask money from others or anything like that, not just like stuff. So I feel more confident, so I am readier to help my friends back in Turkey or wherever they are because now I put the mask on myself. When it comes to the support networks, it wasn't directly the support networks. Nobody gave us money because we were exiles, but it was the Arts Council of Wales who helped us produce our work, which was also a great support network. But apart from that, there was with Be Aware Productions, but there was also an incredible support from the Equity. Equity is Actors Union of Britain, of the whole United Kingdom. So they've got branches in Scotland, Ireland, Wales, north of England, south of England, and elsewhere. So I was the president of Actors Union of Turkey, so that was an incredible solidarity. And the Welsh art scene also kind of welcomed us with open arms. But I have to add something. I know it's going to be a long answer, but I have to add something. Most people ask me why I chose Wales. And I think the question is now irrelevant, because I think the most important thing today is why I chose to stay in Wales. Because I could have ended up in Wales and then go to London, as most people would do. But because I've never felt like a stranger in Wales for a day. I don't know whether my experience would have been the same in England. I'm not sure. I can only guess that because Wales is herself an underdog, maybe it helped. Maybe they were also colonized. They were also underdog. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it is like. Of course, I cannot feel it in my veins like you do, but at least for the first time in my life, I understood what is it to look at the center from the periphery. So how Istanbul is seen from Diyarbakir. Just a glimpse of it, at least. So maybe that was also kind of helpful in terms of the support network, self-care, exile, a new identity, and a new belonging.
And then Germany, it's the situation where you are.
أريد دما باندemiye de az vak hertim beri pandemiye josabum ser masaya xwe dixebitim tiştekî zêde neguherî.
Before the pandemic and after the pandemic, I couldn't say that there was a huge change in my life because I was sitting on a table, you know, and I was just writing, I was just working alone.
Li Kölnê dijîm ji xwe yani berî pandemiyê jî li Kölnê insan zêde xeber nadim bihevre.
I was living in Cologne. I was living in Cologne, and it was like, you know, like normal in Cologne, not to text each other, you know, not to call each other. It's like a normal thing. That's why I couldn't say that it changed a lot.
Bu mehek ez li Berlînê me, Berlînê insan bi rastî xeber didin, sohbeta dikin, hevdinas neke jî têkiliyeke heye yani.
It has been a month. I'm living here in Berlin, and I can say that yeah, Berlin is not the same way. At least if even you don't know each other, you at least say like nod each other, you know, like good morning or say hello. That was not the case in Cologne.
Lê çi baş bû min ji xwe re wext dît ku ew lîteratûra dijmêtînger, antîkolonyal min cardin ji ber çav derbas kir, hemû nivîskarên Afrikî yên postkolonyal min cardin xwendin û halê xwe yê Stenbolê min cardin nirxandin.
But I can say that during the pandemic, I got a chance to read the whole, not maybe the whole, but the basics of the colony literature or the colonized literature, you know, and or the literature about the colony or the colonial history. And I got to see, or I got to understand myself a bit better.
و هلبت لألمانيا أو درفت هيك وتجبو خبطين خا فونا ببيني بورصا ببيني بصايا وان فونو بورصا جي من خباطا خا ببيت ترس أو ترساو كوا سكري خوا شوا بدن دبارا خوا شوا بكم بيترس من همو خباطين خا مشاندن.
And also better to put it out that in Germany as artists, I have some, you know, tools like at least the opportunities to even at least to pay my rent, you know, to buy my goods in my daily life because I was supported by the government or the local government, local state. That's why, yeah, that's maybe an advantage here. I can say that during the pandemic or during the exile here, my 3 years, for the last 4 years, that I get a chance to just reckon on myself what I can do here, what I can produce here.
هلبت جارنا هن تشتين بالکش درد كفا بيشيا من قاوا كواز بخازم جارا بيشي جارا أول سالين دست بيكي از چوم به سازین آلمان را از بوان را جوینا من چکر جا من گفت ایدی از جی لور دجیم با هوای که پروفسیونل جبولیستکین خود خوازم پشکریا و بگرم اوانا جی گوتن پیشی هر بشا انترکلتورل نفکرین کو کار من جی کاری که استتیکه کاری که هنریه وسا فهم کردن کوک از کاری که کلتری دیکم.
After I spent like 2 years or 3 years, I started to produce my own plays. I started to write my own plays, and I took it to the German institution or my circle here that I got into in the last 3 years. But I noticed that the German artists or the German institutions or the communities that I just attended here or that I just got, they have a different perspective towards me, and they are just taking me and putting me in a concept or on a different place than the other German artists, and they're just pushing me towards, let's say, intercultural projects, but I could say that they were like for amateurs, They didn't even look at like something that I produce has an aesthetics, has value for me, for my culture, for what I have produced so far. They have an attitude, like a certain attitude towards me.
اری جبر وی جاز دویم بو 4 سال لکلنی به تو شانوی که آلمان را تکیلی هم چه نبود یعنی از من درفت ندید کو بکوم نوانجی تنی شانوی که آلمان هبول بونه تکیلی هم بوان را چه بود و که دن تو تکیلی یک چه نبود.
That first, I have to say that during the last 4 years, we couldn't do anything with the artists, with the institutions, with the communities in Cologne, because of the reason that I now explained, because there was a distance between me and the others, like the German ones, just only one institution, like the theater in Bonn, we collaborate and we produce together.
Ver insan bersive naden mailata yani peyamata.
In Germany, they are not answering your emails. But I kept sending,
Az nikarum veya fam bikim, txazım fam bikim le şey min nagre.
To be honest, I tried to understand, basically before judging, but I didn't come up any idea, I didn't find an idea.
Bana dibêjim qena bebêje ez qebul nakim, ez naxwazim te bibînim, ez naxwazim bi te re bixebitim.
Yeah, at least someone can write an answer, okay, we couldn't work together, or no, we didn't just like your project, but at least like an answer, we need it.
Ji bo koçberekî, ji bo penaberekî bêbersivî tiştî herî zehmet ez bê.
When you think of an immigrant or the migrant who doesn't have any answer for any questions, and in a strange country, let's imagine it, the situation that I was in.
Her tim li hêviya tiştekî disekine. Hêviya bersiva heqê rûniştinê, hêviya bersiva mailekê, hêviya bersiva peyamekê, hêviya bersiva...
Like waiting for Godot. You are always waiting. Waiting for hope, waiting for answer, waiting for feedbacks, waiting for what others think. Yeah, you're just waiting, in continuous waiting.
Dibe weke arafekî.
Oh, that's the good. Well,
Limbo.
Limbo. Yeah, I would say limbo, but I guess maybe I should add not a limbo, but not going, but not going forward and back. You're just really more, yeah, suspended. You're kind of suspended, you know.
او شانويا خودي امتيازين سبيبوني لإسطنبول يجي هبو هاتم في درجة هي.
That's why the advantageous side, the you know, the being the white. It's the same here. It was the same in Istanbul too, in Turkey. I wasn't white there, and I'm not white here, you know.
جبركو ما شانويا كردي ذكر لإسطنبول يجي ما جتو سازيا برسف ندكر.
Why I'm saying this, because while we try to do our play our plays like the theaters, do some theatrical work in Istanbul too, when we just send our I don't know, emails, you know, when we call the institution in Turkey too, they didn't also give answer to us, you know. I just start to feel the same things, the same processes, you know, the hindered one here too.
البت الإسطنبولي قد خجي هبو قنبة الفيدري أو قد خاتنا.
But also the worst, in Turkey we were banned too, you know, but in Germany maybe I can say that we were not at least banned.
الفرج سانسور هي حتى سريمة لدورتمنتي لسكا كما سانسور كده.
Oh, in Dortmund, but there was a censure on our one of our plays, yeah. And one hour they just stop it to play it.
حتى دكارم بيجم تدا چند حب ترك دخابتين بدسته وانا هات صار سانسور كده.
As far as we understood that there were among the crew members, there were some Turks, and they just spelled the deeds, you know, and that's why they just censored, I guess.
بس درجنا كم بكرتاسي processa بواجهة من ألمانيا.
To cut it short, that was my experience during the pandemic, you know, that or in Germany at all.
Yeah, to cut it short, we should, no, it's fantastic. You're all three very good storytellers. I have so many questions, but of course we are very tight with time. So I think now we can, for the next, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes, we go a little bit over time, we open it to the floor, to the audience, to my esteemed colleagues. If you have any questions, and I can give you this microphone, so please wait for the microphone.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing your thought and experience. It's quite impressive. And I maybe have a more abstract question. What kind of possibilities or impossibilities lie in an exiled relationship to language? Like when you're writing in Kurdish and you said you're always exiled even in this language because you cannot speak it. Is there in this gap or in this diffraction, is there what can you do with the language? What relation do you have to your language? Is my question clear?
While it's been translated, let me just try to briefly, this time briefly, reply. Obviously, my native language is not an oppressed language. It is, on the contrary, the oppressing language. But what I found in Wales was like that now living with an oppressed language, which is Welsh, which can be compared to Kurdish. So it is Britain's Kurdish, in a way, Welsh. So for me, English was an interesting exploration. Yes, Welsh was, yes, but in order to function in a language, to me, again from Henry Pachter, there was a wonderful quote which says, people can have small talks, normal migrants can small talks, but for intellectuals, you need to fly on the language, and you always know that you're flying one level below the language that you now come into. For me, English was like, I needed to be, obviously I've been speaking English since I was, I don't know, 12, 13, but I thought I knew English, and I didn't. I hadn't. So I had to relearn English. I had courses from my friends in terms of like very kind of fix some of the mistakes that I always make, and I also had some pronunciation, accent, I had a very American accent, so I had to change that. But because I'm so obsessed with language, I always kind of try to find, why is it like this? Why is it like that? That kind of created a distance with the Turkish language. And when I was doing Nazım Hikmet 2 years ago, all of a sudden I started to see Turkish differently, like a foreign language. And I was like, oh, these irregularities, these stuff that doesn't have any rules or anything happens in Turkish as well. That's interesting, because you never look at your language from a distance. So that kind of gave me that understanding of, and maybe more with Welsh, I became more respectful to other languages as well, all the minority languages. So I always try to learn something, at least to say hi, hello, thank you, all these kind of things. So it really helps. The most important thing is the distance. When you've got distance with your own culture, with your own identity, which I all believe is a construct. So identity is a construct. That when you've got that distance with the construct, I think it helps to be more to explore more.
Great, yeah. Well, I'm also one of those guys who has been speaking and even to some extent writing in English for a long time, and been translating from English since I was 14. And came to Europe, and I know many cities and countries in Western Europe, and especially the case of English being spoken in Amsterdam is really interesting. It made me not to learn Dutch, because we can say to some extent English is, as it is, within the scope of linguistics, it's an imperial language. And in Netherlands, maybe not in the whole of Netherlands, but especially in Amsterdam, the dominant language is English. That's why one cannot learn Dutch Netherlands. Right now, I'm to some extent good at reading in Dutch, and even I can translate some simple pieces, literary pieces. But when I go out and I want to listen to Dutch guys, which you rarely find them, especially youth are really loving speaking in English. But the old people, when I just coincide with them and listen to them, I don't understand any word. And this imperial side, or imperial aspect of English, also to some extent bothering me, because my mother tongue is one of the tongues, the languages harshly assimilated, not by one culture, one state, but by 4 different states and cultures. And we're losing our mother tongue. But against English, many other languages are disappearing. So that's why many times I underline that, speaking in English is not, that was something that's really high or lofty. English is good for me, just I translate the English classics, or through English, the Irish classics. Yeah.
I remember also that all of your translations are actually also language projects in a way, because you have to collect the words for them. So when you translated Hamlet, for instance, into Kurmanji, you had to also find equivalent words for it, and the same probably for even more. I think the Ulysses, which is so hard to translate. So it's a linguistic game in itself almost. So how did that new space of Amsterdam maybe free maybe some of the words or hampered it? I'm not sure.
Since 1990, when I was at the high school, the first year of high school, I started to collect the words and the proverbs and the different uses of my language until I came to Europe. And I can say that in the northern part of Kurdistan, I'm so sorry for that, southeast of Turkey, or east of Turkey they call.
Whoever wants to call themselves what that is, that must set the premise, I think.
We have around 9,000 Kurdish villages, and more than 4,000 of them were burnt down by Turkish state. I have seen many of those villages because...
I was there in 1997, by the way.
Yeah, as a soldier.
What?
As a soldier?
No, as a journalist.
Yeah.
I was in Dargecit, I was in most of the places in 1997.
Yeah. So, in spite of those hardships, I used that time in a useful way, like, nearly 25, 26 years. I collected all beauties, all richness of my language. Because of the oppression in Kurdistan, especially in northern part of Kurdistan, and also Iran is conducting same thing, we even don't have proper dictionaries. So if one wants to translate, for example, William Butler Yeats, his poetry, or Sylvia Plath, or Dante, the Kurdish translator should start from the very beginning. You should collect words, proverbs, and listen to people, and thanks to technology, through technology, through Twitter, and also different platforms, we are being aware of different usages, and I'm a good follower of that. But it is again not enough, because though I have translated more than 100 literary works, most of them from English into Kurdish, and including the works by James Joyce, from now on I can tell that my language doesn't have a future. And that's the main question I'm always asking to myself. Who is going to read Ulysses, or my Ulysses in Kurdish? Who is going to play all those theatrical pieces I translated from Shakespeare? The Merchant of Venice, Hamlet, and the others. I'm realistic. I'm so sorry, but my language, being spoken more than 50 million people in the world, is disappearing. That's a crime.
Eri az beri 20 sala dest bi hînbûna Kurdî kir, kurmancî kir, zimanê dayika xwe. Hê jî hîn dibim, hê min pêvajoya xwe temam nekiriye, hê min temam hîn nebûye Kurdî. Ez hatim Almanya û hînî İngilizcî û Almanî dibim.
It took my 20 years to learn Kurdish, and still I'm saying this, I'm learning my language, my mother tongue, and now I'm just dropped in German, in English too, and I'm still learning. Yeah, that's my process with languages,
û hişê min wek kaosekê, wek bahozekê niha.
I could say that my memory, or my brain is like in storm. Actually in storm out of with words.
û nava vê kaosê de, vê bahozê de dinivîsim û nizanim metnê min jî tijî kaosin, tijî bahozin.
Sometimes I find myself thinking, while I was writing what I'm now writing, in the middle of this chaos, the chaos of the words, between the languages, between the different languages. Does it really affect what I'm writing to, Does it also sound chaotic to the text that I'm writing? I ask myself this question too.
Erê, dawiya dawî ziman ji bo min ne tenê wate ye, mane ye. Ziman her wiha ji bo min deng e. Dengê hebûnê ye.
That's why I need to say this. The language itself is not like a tool for everyone, The meaning, the umbrella meaning, the umbrella term, the language is a tool. For me, yes, it's meaning, but other than it's the voice, the voice of my identity, voice of what the others that makes me.
Loma jî gav ez dinivîsim tenê me problem tune. Lê gav ez lîstikekî derxin de ser dîwana şanoyê tevî lîstikvana dixebitim. Vê çaxê problem dest pê dike ji ber ku lîstikvan bi zimanê xwe perwerde nebûne. Hînî lîstikvaniyê bi zimanê xwe nebûne. Ji loma jî problem derdikeve.
When I was writing alone, when I was writing in Kurdish alone, it's a problem, of course. Yeah, I'm already, I can say humbly, I'm master on it, But when I just took to the place and try to work with my colleagues, my other, the artists and actresses who are not educated in Kurdish and also are not trained in Kurdish in theater. That's why lots of problems just came out, during taking the plays on the stage. That's the same problem that I get through in Istanbul and in here too, in German too. And the verse itself is in Kurdistan too, the same problem going through with the Kurdish people too, because the young Kurdish artists and actresses, they are not educated in Kurdish too, that's the educational system. These young people lack of this.
I mean, we said we could go until 10 after 3, so we have 5 more minutes, but that means the answer should be very, very short. And I saw one, in the audience.
Thanks. Thank you very much for this panel. I think it was very interesting to see exactly how the experience of exile is very personal and very individual, so one cannot really generalize what are we going through. I just want to make a short question to Mirza, Mr. Metin. So I think it's very important that you pinpointed this gray area between coming to Germany and receiving this kind of support, financial support, and then being censored in the theater. I think it's very, very interesting that you deconstruct this tokenism of German state being open to everybody, but they're not providing artistic needs for the theater. And I really congratulate you on saying this public. It's maybe not such an easy task to do. And just a short question for you is, do you still then believe in some kind of social transformational potential of theater? And what is theater today in Germany for you? Do you still think that a person has to be activist, political activist, to really have some political potential in his or her society? Or could we do this with the theater? So I'm just asking this short question. Thank you very much.
Social justice.
نتني لألمانيا أري بقشتي همو جهاني أزدبيم شانو تايبتيا خويا روتياليستيك وانداكريا أزدبيم.
Maybe here I would like to start with that. The first thing that I saw here, that the theater, the role of theater, or the theater has a kind of rituality in itself, Here in Germany, I just noticed that it lost it. Like in Germany, the rituality of the theater, we lost it here.
حلبت نقارن بيجم همو ألمانيا من الاستقاطة تماشاكرية تانية من الكورني البوني ولو البرليني من الاستقاطة تماشاكرية حتى جدستي متى أزدشم تماشا دكم اللي تشتينكم تماشاكرنا براستيجي أو كوكا شانوي أزنابينم.
I have seen, I can't say that I have seen all of the plays here in Germany staged, but I try to see the theater plays here in Köln, in Cologne, in Bonn, in Berlin too. The thing that I saw here is that I'm lost.
نقارن بيجم لهمو ألمانيا من الاستقاطة تماشاكرية تاني كولن بون وبرلين من الاستقاطة تماشاكرية حتى جدستي منتي استماشا دكم جلوما جي بلكي شيروفيا من نراست بجي اللي أزبينم كوكا شانوي روتيال أو حستا روتيالي ونداوية الفاندرا.
Maybe it's a bit harsh to say this, but what I have seen here during my experience, here in Germany, the theater itself lost its essence, I guess, like it's so trockene auf Deutsch, it's so dry here, it doesn't have the rituality in itself as a tool, you know, to do something or to transmit what you think.
Diagesis de diagesis vebejie l'roşlate ruhake diagesis هي لألمانيا الاستكنكو من ألمانيا تماشى كرنا دوان ده diagesis بروحها يعني أو vebejie هي لروحه واندا كريا.
The matter of diegesis in theater, it's not here, you know. I try too hard to find it, but the matter of diegesis, through the rituality, through the emotions, not the solely emotions, but I guess you get it. But what's the role of the diegesis in theater? Yeah, it's lost it here, I guess, in Germany.
Problemek هي دنابرا ميمسيسو diagesis ده.
Yeah, the basis of the problem is with this. The broken thing between the diegesis and mimesis here. But that's the thing that I see. To cut it short, I don't know if it's just the answer or, yeah.
Thank you. I think we have to round up because I see also the other people arriving. That question is actually also very pertinent because I asked almost the same question to Mehmet Ali in the podcast. So when the podcast is out, you should definitely listen to this answer. Thank you for your attention, for being here, for sharing the space. Thank you. Thank you for your stories, for your experiences. Yeah. And of course, at 6 o'clock tonight, we will be continuing this discussion and going much deeper into the night with these questions. So you're all very welcome there at Engelnest in Berlin, in Schöneberg. And there will be fun. There will be also music and some drinks. Yes. Okay. Thank you.